Hello, everyone. GM, how's it going? Good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. That's the cool thing about this hackathon is like we can catch everyone in the world. So, hey, drop in the chat where you're seeing us from if you want to. That's also super interesting to know. We're on week 3 of Block Magic. Time is flying by super fast. I hope that you guys are working on your projects. About 20 days for the deadline. So we're really excited to see what you guys build. And we are kickstarting this week with Andy and Oleg from Kinsero, and they are going to tell you everything about how you can launch your project, take it from the startup, like the ideation, and then really like taking it up to the next level. So stick around, it's going to be fun. Lots of cool things for you to learn. And with that, Andy, Oleg, I'll pass it over to you. The floor is all yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andy. This is Oleg. We're both the co-founders of Kinsero. And today we're talking about how to launch a project after you win a hackathon. But I think a more appropriate title would be how to take your project from a project space into a startup space, because there is actually quite a big difference there. And we wanted to talk about it from a business point of view, which I will cover, and from a technical point of view, which my lovely co-founder Oleg will cover.
Yep.
If you have any questions or anything after this, feel free to reach out to us over Twitter, Telegram as well. I think our Telegram
Same handle, yeah.
Yeah,
Telegram
so same handles and everything. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Feel free to talk to us. And unless Oleg, you have something to say, should we just jump straight into it?
Other than that, I'm happy to be here, guys, and happy building, everyone.
Perfect. Awesome. All right, so let's talk about the business part. What is a project and what is a startup? Well, the way that I usually define it is a project is where you and a couple of your friends, you get together, you find out this like really cool feature that you can create, or a really cool thing that you can put together with existing tech, or something brand new that you can come up with. And that is a very interesting thing, right? Because the whole building process and designing it and everything is a very exhilarating process where you're very creative, where everything is interesting and stuff like that. But after you've built that feature or something, it's like, if you want to take it further, you need to turn it into a startup. And what a startup is, it actually is at the core of it, it's a business. And a business that needs to make that needs to make money, that needs to monetize, and needs to survive. So that's why a startup has to solve a user problem. And this is where I see a lot of a lot of divide coming in from, and a lot of projects and companies kind of tend to fall into this mistake, and we've fallen into this mistake many times ourselves. Is a lot of the time you build a feature and then you start looking for users, and then you start looking for the market, right? Although it does work out sometimes, don't get me wrong, you can always get lucky, but more importantly, you have to look at it from the way of what problems are out there, what problems do users experience on daily basis or on whatever basis, and how can we use technology, be it Web3, be it Web2, be it anything, like how can we solve those problems? So if and when you're building a startup, first thing that you need to do is start speaking to users as soon as possible. I think a good rule of thumb is, at first, your first user should be you and your co-founder and maybe some of your friends, right? First, start from your own personal problems, try and solve them, and then start looking for people like yourself to solve their problems as well. So first of all, for example, I will use Kinsero as an example many times, because this is something that we're going through. Because the way that we've started, we knew that we wanted to be in the cross-chain space, and we were tired of having to, connect our wallet to 20 different web apps a day just to do very simple transactions. So at first we were like, okay, let's create an aggregator, right? And for it to be a place where you can connect your wallet to one place and then do whatever you want, like stake into any chain protocol, whatever, swap into any asset on any chain, and so on and so forth. And so that's what we started with. It was like, okay, let's build this app. Let's build this consumer product. And what I think is very important for you to do is to start building something from day one, right? Start talking to people like yourself and start building something from day one, because your iteration cycle is something that you have to be very comfortable with. You have to understand that your first product, second, third, fifth, 10th product is not going to be good, right? It's an iterative process. So I'm not a big fan of like all of these stealth modes and stuff like that, of like, oh, we're building something really cool, just wait and see and blah, blah, blah. Because when you're doing that, you're essentially living in the world that you came up with yourself in your head, right? With your own worldview, with your own kind of spin on it and stuff like that. But it does not usually reflect what the reality is and what the market actually demands. And if you want to make a business, and if you want to make a startup, you have to see what the market demands. You have to see what the problems are, and you have to solve them somehow. And then you have to monetize that solution. So, as I said, step one, solve your own problem, and then start building the first prototype as soon as you can, right? So the way that it will usually go, you will build a prototype, then you will launch it, and then you will have a hard time trying to get first users in to start surveying them. Use some marketing tools or some marketing ploys like Galaxy campaigns or whatever. Like, try to get people to use your product. Many people, many different people. Of course, you can have a hypothesis of what your ideal customer profile would be and stuff like that. But usually at this stage, you don't know anything and you have to be comfortable with that. As soon as you deploy it, you have to start asking questions. You have to start surveying. And those questions should be really, really well thought out and well formed. And I would recommend a very good book on this topic. It's called The Mum Test, of how to position those questions and how to extract the most value from users. Because this is where you have to understand what is it that we can do to make you use it. And then you get your first set of answers, and then you have to change your product, right? And then you have to iterate. Then you have to ask questions again and iterate, and ask questions again and iterate. And this whole cycle of we build something, we deploy it, we ask questions, and then we change it, we deploy it. This is called an iteration cycle. And when you're a startup, you don't have a lot of time, you don't have a lot of resources, you don't have anything. Just apart from your like deep desire and deep fire and deep deep need to build something, there's nothing else. So you have to focus on reducing that iteration cycle to as short of a time frame as possible. Even like shaving off a day or two here or there will result in wonders down the line. Because say that there are two companies, that one of them has an iteration cycle of a month, and another one has an iteration cycle of a week, right? The one that has a month, they build better, they put more effort and they try to make all the buttons look nice and all of that stuff, blah blah, and they ship it out, and then they get feedback and they have to throw away 80% of the stuff. For us, it was like a usual thing. I think Oleg is like very upset with me because we had to like change our landing page like 6 times in the first 3 months. We had to change everything so many times. So don't get too attached to it. Just build until you find that like specific thing that you can focus on. Reducing that iteration cycle is because everybody has to go through an X amount of iteration cycles. If your iteration cycle is a week, in a year's time, you will go through 52 iterations. If your iteration cycle is a month, you will go only through 12, right? So if you speed up this process as much as possible, a process of researching and finding out what is that core thing, that the core like gap in the market where you can like fit your solution in there, this is how you do it. You just test it, and then you survey, and then you ask. So good tool is surveying people. Another good tool is to interview people, like actually speaking to them face to face, or over Zoom or over Google Meet or anything. Because not only does it give you a lot of insight, but it also starts building that community. And in general, for every single project, especially in Web3, community is the number one thing that you should focus on. And the way that you build communities, you have to build that trust. And to build that trust, you have to be transparent. You have to show up. You have to answer questions. You have to show that you're doing something. You have to build that connection, because this is still, of course, we're in the realm of code. We're in the realm of Web3 and internet, but we're still humans, and we're selling to humans, and we're interacting with humans. And that trust And that relationship is only formed through time and through conscious effort to do so. And by interviewing those people, by showing up, for example, what we do a bi-weekly community call, where essentially myself, Oleg, and other team members, we get on a call on our Discord, and we just like talk through what happened in the past 2 weeks, what we did, what worked out, what didn't work out. Just be very transparent about it, because that transparency will start building trust, and that trust will result into a good community. And the number one problem that you have to overcome is to get your first 1,000 true believers in your project, in your tool, in your service, in your project, or whatever. Like first 1,000 maximalist users, because from a point of about 1,000, a word of mouth starts spreading, and then you can grow. But to get to that pivoting point of 1,000 users, it's a lot of work. It is, and it's not just 1,000 people viewed your page and stuff like that. It's 1,000 people show up to your Discord. They show up to your calls. They really like you, and they really like what you're building, because you've built that connection. And so what I would say a good first 6 to 9 months of a project should be is iterate, build that community. You don't have to know all the answers from day one, because it's impossible to know. So again, let's look at what we did. We wanted to build that aggregator, right? And we put out the first prototype, and then we changed it, and we were interviewing, and we were surveying and stuff like that. Then about 6 months down the line, we had quite a lot of data to work with. And through that data, we extracted the 3 most important things that users were looking for in a solution like ours, in a cross-chain solution. It has to be quick, it has to be secure, and it has to be easy to use, right? And it wasn't something that we came up with. This is like reliable data that we can rely on, and this is something that we can do, that we can work on top. So at that point, we were like, oh, okay, let's go and find infrastructure, because at that point, we were using SDKs of other companies like Li-Fi, Rango, Enzo, and so on and so forth. And we're like, okay, so we need to find a solution that is consistently quick, consistently secure, and consistently easy to use. Let's go and find infrastructure like that. And to our surprise, then we found out that it doesn't exist yet. And this is where we saw an opportunity, right? We started out, we wanted to build an aggregator. And through this iterative process, we got to the point where we see an opportunity of market demanding a certain set of features, a certain product, and that product not existing yet. And this is when we're like, okay, this is an interesting avenue that we need to explore. So we pivot. And we pivoted many times beforehand, but this is a moment of a very important and big pivot for us. We pivot, it's like, okay, it doesn't exist, so we have to build it. We have to build it ourselves, not only for our product, but maybe it's going to be something that's useful for other people. So we're like, okay, let's pivot into the infrastructure side of things. That's when we started to work with Chainlink. That's when we got into the build program. And the reason why is because we saw CCAP as a very, very good settlement layer, because it's the most secure, the most decentralized, and the best way to migrate funds across point A to point B across different blockchains. So that's when we're like, okay, that's a good solution, but we identified a problem. That solution takes about 26 minutes on average to execute. And through our research, we found that users don't like that. Users need execution in less than a minute. And we're like, okay, this is something that we can hyper focus on. And this is when we got to our third point of defining our purpose and our direction. This, through this iterative process and through finding this gap in the market, you can identify what is it exactly that you are pursuing, right? We didn't say that we're pursuing building an aggregator at this point. We're like, okay, we're pursuing building the most secure, fully decentralized, quick, consistent, and transparent cross-chain infrastructure, right? This is our purpose. There were a lot of reasons for it. There were a lot of, we looked at the market and the fact that a lot of companies, they kind of cut corners with centralization, and we're very against that, blah, blah. And that's where we're like, okay, this is our purpose and this is our direction. And this is to get to this point, to accurately define what is it that you're actually building. We are not even talking about tokens or anything. No, define what you're building. Define with reliable data what and why you're building. That takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, right? So you get to this point, and if you define it well, this is the key to your marketing then. Because these convictions and this purpose, this is something that's going to draw people in, because they're like, oh, we feel the same way, or oh, this is something that's very interesting. Now it piques your interest. It's not only an app, it is now a certain solution to certain problems that people start exhibiting and that people are experiencing. So this is a lot easier to get behind, right? So you get to this point, and then, at this point, you're probably half a year into your project, or however long it will take you. Maybe it will take you less time, right? But the iterative process, it doesn't stop, right? Even now, we survey and interview like constantly. So what do you start doing now? You have your purpose, you have your direction, you have an idea of the product, you have an idea of what your users want, because you start collecting all of that data, and you start seeing how people respond to what you're serving them. And then you start building your ideal customer profile. You start looking at the data, and you start drawing conclusions from the data. And most importantly, you will then need to take those conclusions and you will need to validate them to ensure that the conclusion that you have drawn is what people actually need. And you do that through various different tools, but the best tool is just build it, show it to them, to they like it, to they not, and then go from there. It's always much easier to ask questions, not arbitrary questions of do you like it, but here's the thing, use it, tell me what you think, right? What did you like, what didn't you like? Just it washes away a lot of, I don't know if we can swear, a lot of nonsense that users would unconsciously say to you. So you have to focus on making sure that surveying part, that you form the questions well, that you don't collect bad data. Read the MUM test about this. And so after you drawn those conclusions and you have validated a few ideas and you have your purpose and you have your direction, and all of this is backed by some sort of data, this is when people usually start fundraising, right? This is going to be like the first step where you can fundraise, where you can go to investors and stuff like that. And that's very important, because if you go to an investor like, oh, look, this is cool, and they're like, oh yeah, that could be cool, right? But why would people use it? Right? And then you cannot answer that. It's like, oh, but this would make it so much easier, blah, blah, but you don't know that people will use it. But if you use the method of validating and asking questions, stuff like that, you come to an investor, you're like, look, we've done this amount of work, we've done this amount of research, we've built so many prototypes and stuff like that, we've collected so much data, and through that data we have concluded this, and we found this gap in the market, and now we need capital to grow a solution to this gap in the market. Come on board. Much easier sell, and it's a much more grown-up approach to get to it. Surprisingly, not a lot of projects or companies within the Web3 space are, looking at it from this way. But we have found it to be quite successful and effective so far. And so after you've done that, maybe you have even raised funds. Don't need to be raising funds. You can always go for grants. Grants are a very good way to fund yourself. You will bootstrap. It's you will tighten up your budgets, and you will try to get to a certain point, because yes, you can raise earlier, but you also have to balance it out of like, the later I raise, most of the times, like the higher the valuation would be, because you validated more ideas and you reduce the risk that an investor takes. So you have to play around with that as well. But anyways, so after you've done that, this is when you start focusing on the team. Well, you should start focusing on the team from day one, but this is where it kind of grows into like, this is what we're building. We have to start looking for specific people, to do specific things. But what's important in team is it doesn't really matter. It's a controversial opinion, but it doesn't really matter how much, how many years has this person worked in Web3, and all of this stuff. Because when you are just early on, it's going to sound very Gen Z, but the vibe has to be very similar amongst team members. And what I mean by the vibe is the general consensus of how we approach things and how we do it. For example, in my case, the number two things that the two main things that I look at, first of all, is the level of curiosity, because if you're curious, very curious, and you always try to go to the roots of the problem, to the roots of the idea, and try to understand it very, very well, that is a very good asset to have, because the work produced will be very thought through. And second is communication. How good can you communicate your findings? How good can you communicate the work that you've done to the rest of the team, so it's much smoother to work together, right? But then you start looking for specific people to join your team, specific developers and stuff like that. But do not overlook the fact that everybody has to be exactly on the same page with how we do these things, because now you're forming a core team. That core team, if you're successful, that core team will be managers and will be like high up people down the line when you grow into a big company, right? So that core team, they will have to be like not messengers. They will have to embody the whole culture and the whole vision of the company within themselves, right? Because as founders, you are the vision of the company, right? You are the leaders, you direct where it goes, you set the pace, you set the culture, you set the work approach, you set everything, right? And what you set, you have to live it as well. You find people that are similar to you, that have similar convictions, and you work well together, then it can spread out throughout the entire organization. So that is why those first few hires are so important, because if you have a group of 7 people who are all on the same page and everything is amazing, but an 8th person that comes in is complete opposite, and it starts destroying the whole, conviction that people have, the whole attitude, the whole work approach and stuff like that, that can really slow you down and destroy a lot of the stuff you've built so far. So don't overlook that. Try to measure it and try to put down the list of requirements, the list of things that you're particularly looking for, and look at what the team you have now. Look at how the team has to expand down the line, because then you will start looking for people in your life, or looking for people who are interviewing you. Will be like, oh, that person could be good down the line and stuff like that. Because hiring is the number 1 or number 2 biggest pain point in Web3 or in development in general. It is a very big problem. And coming back to investors and raising money, right? If you have a good idea of who you're looking for, how you will look for them, and what will attract them to your team, that also de-risks their investment, thus increasing your valuation, thus making it more likely that you will get funded, right? So you have done all of that. You have a good team, you have a good validated idea, you found the gap in the market that you are going for, then you start you've been building all this time, but now you're starting building with more, with more conviction, not conviction, with more purpose, right? You build stuff that is more hyper focused into that thing, and hyper focus is very important. Now we're moving to the pick your battles side, right? When you are a young company, you don't have resources, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough anything. The only thing you have is, again, that conviction, you have that fire, you have your blood, sweat, and tears that you're throwing into this pit that you call your startup. That's all you have. With such limited resources, you cannot start competing with industry giants or with bigger companies just because they have more resources. You can't compete on everything. But you can take any startup, and you can boil it down to 1 or 2 very specific things that they do very, very well. This is where you have to boil down your thing. You have to hyper focus on one thing, one, maybe 2, but one thing. You have to do it. You have to think about it all the time, because if you hyper focus all of your resources, this can get you ahead, right? Once you are ahead, you can then start dabbling into some other things, right? So don't start trying to rebuild Chainlink just because you found a more efficient way of doing 1 or 2 things, and now you will be bigger than Chainlink. Chainlink has been around for 10 years or more, right? Or even more. Like, pick your battles. Hyper focus on one thing. Don't pick the fights that you will not be able to win, because you pick fights when you know that you will win them. Don't start competing against giants before you even before you get anywhere. Try to be smart about everything that you do. Hack your way into stuff, right? Find where that particular USP of your lies. Like, what is that thing you hyper focus on? And then you figure it out. Then it's like, how do you distribute this? Distribution, another big thing of like, you put up a website, you put up your app, you have a Twitter account, everything is cool. You launch it, no one comes because you don't have distribution. You have to understand where do the this is why ideal customer profile is so important. It's like, where do people that you're targeting, where do they live? Like, where on the internet, or which communities, blah blah, where do they live? How can you tap into that? Be it through marketing, be it through integration of your solution into that community, into another product or whatever. It's like, find cost-effective ways to get there, right? To get into it, because you need that distribution, and a lot of people overlook it. So you figure out your distribution. Hopefully, you built out a product that and because you validated it, the people that you're distributing it to will find useful, and they will start using it. You have a team behind you that knows the product to the core, that understands your direction and your purpose. You blast that purpose to everybody through your marketing channels, stuff like that, so people start getting connected to you. You have spent months and months building that community, building that rapport with that community, right? Of your people within your Discord, within your Twitter, blah blah. You have support, you have what to sell, you have where to sell it, you have who to sell it to. And now when you launch, you see, okay, numbers are going up, people are using it, we're starting to get even more and more feedback. And feedback can be in the form, again, of surveys, interviews, or even install post hog. Look at where people are dropping off, stuff like that. But now you have something to work with. Your feature, no matter how cool it is, no one will know about it, because you do not have $1 million to spend on marketing to tell everybody. So, and it could be a very cool feature, right? But if it doesn't solve a problem, no one will use it. If no one uses it, there is no way for you to monetize it. If there is no way for you to monetize it, there is no way for you to make revenue and thus survive. Investor money is cool, VC money is cool, and there's a lot of it and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the bear market will arrive. And when the bear market arrives, that funding will be gone. You have to be very careful about how you structure treasuries and stuff like that. But if there is no real business model, if there is no real way of you making money, you're running a charity, or you're running a very over-glorified high school project. No, this is a startup. A startup needs purpose. A startup needs users. A startup needs a problem to solve. And your technology has to solve this problem for very specific people. And if you do not do that, if you do not build that, and if you do not find a way to get it to people, well, you will most likely fail. 95% of all of the startups fail. Not because people are dumb. No, it's because it takes time, effort, and experience to learn these things and to build these things. Most people are lazy. They want to cut corners, right? Oh, I can raise, $1 million right now if I promise to do a token in 6 months. A lot of people are falling into that trap right now. Yes, but what will happen in 6 months? Your investors will start dumping, right? How will your project survive? Right? So then you're like, oh shit, maybe I don't have to do that. Maybe I have to think 3 years ahead. Maybe I'm like, oh, where will it get to? Should I really focus on a token now? Answer is no. Don't. Like, literally, until you build a very good product that delivers value, do not even step in the realm of tokens, because the whole purpose of a token is to find, like, you create value, you use your tokenomics to extract that value and dissipate it across all of the token holders. If you do not have a product, or a viable product, or a product with traction, how can you find a way to extract that value? Because you don't know where it even comes from, and then distribute it across to all the token holders. And now, when you launch that token, you not only have your 1,000 users, or whatever users you have, and your Discord users who are here because they like the product, you now have a lot of speculators, a lot of bots, and everybody like on your account being like, when airdrop on this. You don't need that, right? Try and wait a little bit. Build stuff first. But I think my general advice and the general thing that I wanted to talk about here is, look, this is a business. All of these videos on YouTube and stuff like that, they all talk about how quickly you can launch a project, how quickly you can do this, and that. But at the end of the day, a business only survives if it can make money. You can make money only by selling a solution to a problem, because if people don't have that problem, they don't need a solution, they won't pay for that solution, right? And in order to find out what that problem is and find out reliably and reduce your risks of building something useless, is talk to your users, like even before you register the Twitter account. Talk to as many people as you can get. What is your problem? Read books, learn, but don't forget the fundamentals of any business. Web3 is no different to anywhere else, right? Maybe the check sizes are a bit bigger because it's a new innovative technology. But at the end of the day, if you're here to build something long term, to build a great project that will go down in history, rather than doing like a quick 1 or 2 year project, still okay, sure. But if you want to build something great, you have to start off with problems, and then you have to find solutions, and then you cater your tech to cater to those solutions. So yeah, that's pretty much me on the business side. I know I've rambled on a little bit, and I hope that I've conveyed my ideas well enough. Again, reach out to me on Twitter, Telegram, whatever. More than happy to talk to you guys. I will hand over the microphone to Oleg, the lovely CTO, who will tell you how to prepare your tech to mainnet, how to prepare to testnet, and how to do all of that stuff.
Yep.
So
awesome. Yeah, pleasure to meet you, everyone. Yeah, Andy, you shared a huge bulk of wisdom to everyone. We'll all need to process this. And I am about to also drop a lot of specifics on the technical side of things for you guys. So grab your pens and paper. Otherwise, you can just watch the stream once again. There's going to be a lot of specifics. So yeah, feel free to switch the slide, Andy. Awesome. So the first thing that I actually want to point out as a disclaimer is your number one priority is to get to market fast, right? You don't want to sit there, spend a lot of your resources trying to build the best infrastructure, because as Andy said, and it's absolutely true, 80% of this will be scrapped and rebuilt and then scrapped and then rebuilt again. So this very much applies to the technical side of things as well. So you need to make sure that you're not being a perfectionist, but your solutions suffice enough and solve the problem with minimum effort. What I'll talk about, a third of this actually covers startups on an early stage, but quite a bit of stuff that I'll cover will also apply to later stages. So just so you know what you may need to use further down the line, I'll also cover these things. But again, just bear in mind, whatever I'll talk about in the next 20 minutes or so, only 1/3 will apply, because your number one priority is to get to market fast. So the first thing that I'll cover is how to get the code ready for production. I've broken down this topic onto three main things, which is on-chain development, off-chain development, as well as development environment. You need to get all of these things right so you can sleep well and not worry about your infrastructure being exploited, your servers being down, or anything like that. So if we go from the on-chain side of things, the first and the most obvious thing that I suggest you implement is linting. There is this great package called Solhint, which pretty much behaves as an linter, or ESLint is an alternative for the off-chain side of things. So it just performs a static analysis on your code and lets you know if the conventions are on point, if you should rename something, or you should use the right spacings and stuff. There's also a great package from Chainlink for Solhint, which ensures a bit more conventions. So I'd definitely recommend you install that one. Just Google Chainlink Solhint, you'll probably find it. So linting, what it allows you to do is, if you have a team of several people, all of these people will have that linter installed in their project, and they will keep to the same style. And that would make it much easier for the entire team to work on the same code base, because the style will be the same. This also applies to off-chain. So for off-chain, you'll have like other linters and pre-tiers and whatever. you need to make sure that whatever is being pushed has gone through some static analysis and some prettifying, etc. So yeah, the second thing is Slither. It's also a static analysis tool. Its focus is security. So you can also spin Slither up. It will go through your contract and it will let you know where are potential, security vulnerabilities that you need to pay attention to. Also, I highly suggest you to Google some, known smart contract attacks, like the reentrancy attack, or maybe denial of service attacks, or some basic ones like overflow and underflow. It's been a less of an issue in the latest versions of Solidity, but I'd still recommend you go through these and make sure that your contract is not subject to overflow and underflow issues there. Also, a good advice from me is use trusted libraries. Use libraries that are audited, like OpenZeppelin ones, when you want to interact with like ERC tokens, for example, or when you want to make your contract upgradable, like proxies, for example. The benefit here is obvious. You are not spending time and not worrying about the fact that your contracts are vulnerable. OpenZeppelin contracts are audited, so whenever you can, just go for the default option here. Use OpenZeppelin or any other audited library provider to implement the basic functionality, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. If you want to just do some ERC20 token transfers, or if you want to do a basic upgradability proxy for your contracts, just go for the well-known best practice, which is OpenZeppelin in this case. Another good thing for peace of mind is having a panic button for your smart contracts. In particular, I'm talking about OpenZeppelin Possible. There's probably a lot more alternatives to that, but yeah, essentially what it allows you to do is, if you pair this well with monitoring systems, which I'll also cover later, you are able to pause your contracts at any point, which can prevent you from losing funds, especially if you hold some liquidity on your smart contracts. So yeah, having that functionality, which allows you to pause your contracts, is crucial. It's, again, a reactive measure, which is not a favorable measure. Ideally, you like your contracts to be built the way that they are not exploitable, but we cannot work around all potential bugs. So just in case, you ideally need to have that panic button. There's also OpenZeppelin Defender, I believe, which allows you to also execute the pausable functionality and have some basic monitoring there. So yeah, definitely look into that one as well. Another thing that I'd suggest looking into before deploying your contracts to production is optimizing gas usage. The gas usage problem is very, very widespread, and there's 1,000 ways you can approach it. But what I'd suggest as a start is maybe having a look at your storage operations, for example, and trying to minimize them, because storage takes a lot of gas. Also, familiarizing yourself with the opcodes costs. You can look up Ethereum yellow paper, and there's this table of opcodes and how much gas they consume. Just makes it easier for you to navigate that. Try to offload some logic, which is not crucial in terms of security, to off-chain, right? Because computation on chain is very expensive. So ideally, you would like to optimize as much as you can on your contracts in terms of like storage operations or anything else, and offloading some logic off-chain. I'll give an example of what we're building at Concero. Essentially, we have a bunch of smart contracts which are executing cross-chain operations, and we have some off-chain logic, which is the routing algorithm, which is executed on a centralized server. It provides a call data which the client should execute from the front end, and it would take an enormous amount of gas for us to calculate the best route, because we are using a database of all decentralized exchanges. We're walking through it with Dijkstra's algorithm, and we calculate the most optimal route, and that's what executed on the contract. So yeah, play around with it and see how much you can save with your gas operations, because the less gas your contracts consume, the more margin you have to either put your own fee on top, or to be more competitive on the market. So it's a very important metric in this case. And the last kind of thing, which is less specific but still worth mentioning, is you have to minimize the amount of centralized points in your infrastructure. This relates to security side of things. The problem here is if you have a centralized server which does something with your smart contract or with your infrastructure, you're risking the fact that it will get exploited and your entire thing will collapse, right? It's not good for neither security nor like the trustness or trustlessness of the system. So as a kind of as a wrapping of whatever I said previously, also try to figure out the most optimal way for you to minimize centralized points in your infrastructure. Now onto the off-chain optimizations. There is some stuff you can work on if you have a backend API, and as I imagine most of you, if you're building projects, they have some backend there. So the first thing I would take care of is denial of service attacks, right? Because if you get DDoS, again, 1/3 of this is applicable for now. So maybe this is for a later stage. Just keep that in mind again. But yeah, denial of service attacks, they can shut your server down. You'll not be able to serve customers, which is a pain because you lose money and stuff. You need to make sure that your infrastructure is supporting that. To take care of denial of service attacks, there's a couple of ways. The first and the most obvious one is having JWT tokens for authentication, which means that every request that your front end or your user is sending to the backend needs to be signed with a specific key. And that key is obtained by signing up on the website, right? And for signing up on the website, you may need to confirm your email address or maybe your phone number, or if we're talking Web3, a lot of Web2 examples here. If we're talking Web3, maybe just a wallet. But it comes down to doing something before you obtain that key to have that small barrier of entry. And in case someone is like trying to DDoS you, that could go a long way, helping to prevent not all but quite a bit of misuse. Another thing you could use is Nginx block lists. If you're building an infrastructure where you have load balancing, or you have a single service on some like cloud, and it has an Nginx or Apache server to serve your website, you might consider Nginx block lists. And other than that, you could also use Cloudflare, which is a great provider that does a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that the traffic that gets into your website is healthy. Otherwise, it will get blocked automatically. So another option is just proxying everything, all traffic through Cloudflare. That's the denial of service attacks. Again, for a later stage, you may consider something called Dockle, which is a static analysis tool, essentially an image linter that applies to those who are using Docker, and I highly suggest using Docker in your production environment. That linter would essentially walk through your image files and let you know if the images that you're using are vulnerable or they're not reliable. Essentially, it will just give you a quick overview of the image and give you some tips on how to make it more secure. And another thing that I wanted to cover in terms of off-chain is keep your services updated. If your instance that you're running on AWS has a single point of entry, which is your Nginx server or your Apache server, this is a subject of exploitation as well. So as soon as like Nginx discovers or some white hat hackers discover that there is this bug in Nginx version 8 or whatever that is, people go exploit it. And if your Nginx server is running version 8, you better believe that you will be a subject of this attack. So just keep in mind that you have to keep your services updated, and especially this applies to the entry point servers. So Nginx in this case will obtain the traffic from external world. So that's a high priority for you to keep secure. Applies to Apache as well. So whatever server you use, or reverse proxy. Yeah, for the front end side of things, it's a bit easier because a lot of logic and a lot of security needs to be built on the back end. But for front end, you pretty much come down to SQL or no SQL injections that you need to take care of. Essentially, this is malicious code that can be put into forms on the website, and the malicious actor could just get into your databases, for example, or to some endpoints that one should not be authorized to use. So this is pretty easily treatable with sanitizing forms, for example, making sure that no malicious code can be pasted into forms. If you have any forms on your website, which is a very likely scenario. And yeah, you need to also validate your inputs to make sure, pretty much the same thing. Validate your inputs and sanitize them to make sure that there is no malicious code that can be executed on the backend. Now, the third thing about the getting code ready for production is your development environment. The first thing, and the most, I guess, obvious one, use a version control. Everyone probably knows Git, but yeah, I'd just to add a check to that. Make sure you know how to work with branches. Make sure your team knows how to work with branches. Make sure that you know how to merge. That will lift off a lot of weight from your shoulders, especially when working in teams. You also might need a knowledge base, right? If you have some scripts that you need to execute regularly, or if you have some checklists for your work, or you have some methodologies that you want to note down for other team members to know, you need a knowledge base. So a go-to approach is to use Notion, probably. We're using Outline because it has a much friendlier pricing scheme. But yeah, have a look at other options. Maybe if you're a geek like myself, you could use like Obsidian or whatever else. Just make sure it's easy for team members to sync up with this thing, and it's not a huge pain to work with it. So yeah, Notion and Outline are a good fit for a knowledge base. You need to have a project-based ESLint as well as pre-tier. This is something I covered previously. Again, for consistency in your commits. So when something is committed, you don't get like 1,000 changed files or something. You have a single changed file where your developer has changed this particular section. And since everyone has the same pre-tier config and the same ESLint config, the rest of the code stays untouched, which is important to keep your code base standardized and solid. What else? You probably need to include README files for each of your repositories. I imagine if you go into fully fledged startup, you probably will have multiple repositories. So make sure that you have your README files, and in each README file there is an easy to understand guidance of how to get started with this repository. People are usually forgetting to put the example of the environment file, and then like later, a couple of days later, the developer could come into like team Discord or Slack and say, yo, I'm not able to launch this, and we figured out that just the environment files are not there. So it's a very common thing. So make sure that your README file covers everything to the very last bit, to help your developers get started with running the code, with building it. So yeah, it's a must-have for every repository that you are sharing with your team. And last but not least, very obvious one, is have a good team communication tool, right? The go-to solution for us is Discord and Telegram. You could also use Slack, or maybe if you are a fan of self-hosted options, you could use Rocket Chat. But yeah, the options are there. But there's probably a bunch more there. But yeah, those are the first four. Now, moving on to ensuring a stable and reliable environment for your code. I partially covered it in a previous one, but this is more specific to reliability. First of all, pick your cloud provider. And just again, so you have a good sleep at night, make sure that your cloud provider is someone reliable, someone who's not gonna restart your servers randomly, which is, it could be AWS, Azure, maybe DigitalOcean or Google Cloud, or anyone, big enough with the big enough infrastructure, so you don't have to care about your server being down in any moment of time. It should be up 24/7, obviously. So a point which comes in with that is have some monitoring built in. There is a bunch of tools, which is, examples include Uptime Kuma or Pulsatic. We use Pulsatic. Essentially, what it does is it's going to ping your server, no matter if it's a front-end server or a back-end one. It's going to ping it regularly, like 5 minutes, every 5 minutes. And if your server is down, you'll get a notification. And the notification could go into Telegram or Discord. What matters is your team will be informed the minute that your server is down, so you can react as soon as you can to fix this and get it up and running again. So monitoring is very important, comes hand in hand with cloud providers, all for ensuring that your back-end operations as well as front-end operations are stable. And those are the tools that I recommend. Also, for stable and reliable environment, you cannot go without Docker. Docker solves so many problems, and I've went through the path of not using Docker, not understanding how it works, to absolutely loving it because, again, of the stability that brings. So imagine you have like a couple of developers, right? And everyone has a different laptop, and you have the same like Node.js server that you are all working on. And all of a sudden, one of the developers says, yo, it doesn't work for me for some reason. Like another one has a different issue, right? Most of those can pop up because the environment that you're running the code on is different. So to mitigate that, to standardize the environment that your code is running on, I highly suggest to use Docker, because not only it's a great tool for development purposes, because all of your developers are working on the same container and no environmental issue could come into place here. But also when you're deploying your code on a production server, imagine you went onto AWS or some other cloud provider. You may have some discrepancies in Linux distributions, for example, or even Linux versions of the same distribution. So in order to prevent that, all you need to care about is how to install Docker onto that instance and how to run that container. So whatever your server is running, be that like CentOS or Ubuntu or Debian, you will have the same environment which will work the same way. And I think for production's sake, this is highly important to keep in mind. This is probably in the 1/3 of things that you need to take care of when you're moving into production. Docker is a go-to thing, which I cannot recommend enough. What else can I suggest? Docker goes well with load balancing as well. So imagine your server is overloaded with requests, and it's a good problem to have, but just to keep in mind, if you have a container that you can easily replicate, you can use it with Nginx as a pair to load balance it, and within minutes you can spin up the same copy of the same like Node.js server that you have containerized, and you solve your scaling issues like that. Like you just duplicate your server and you don't have to worry about anything else. So that's something that Docker also helps with. And something that I also need to point out about Docker is something that we have come across multiple times, is when you decide that you want to move away from a certain cloud provider for several reasons, the migration process has to be as easy as possible. And if you're not using Docker, and if you're just building on plain hardware or on plain Linux, this is going to be a huge pain. Like your migration process from server A to server B will likely take up to a day. And just to give yourself some flexibility in that front, and to make this into a 30-minute-ish process, what you need to do is use Docker as well, because again, you're using the same environment, and migration as well as duplication is a wonderfully easy process. So yeah, the last thing for stability and reliability that I want to cover is security and access control. This relates to development environment most of all. But yeah, the first thing that I want to cover is make sure that all of your developers and all of the accesses that you give are based on the principle of least privilege. You can Google that, but essentially what it comes down to is you give your developers or your team members the least amount of privileges for them to execute a particular action. That way, you don't expose the secrets that you're not, like, you don't have to unnecessarily expose. Also, an obvious one: share your environmental files in a secure manner. Do not commit them to repositories. Make sure that every team member that has access to your private repositories or has access to like some server side of things, AWSs and stuff, has a two-factor authentication, because we're all humans. We're all prone to social engineering, and we all can make mistakes. I could be streaming my screen and I could be like leaking some password right now. So yeah, make sure that everyone has a two-factor authentication, just to make sure that if someone is trying to get into someone's account from your team, this is a much harder job. Yeah, and the final thing for security and access control, probably have onboarding and offboarding checklists. Again, we're all humans. We are very bad at doing specific things in the right order. So have a checklist which allows you to establish access to certain things for your developers. And then when it's time for you to part ways by any reason, you have another checklist, an offboarding checklist, where you go through each service and you disable access. That way, you're not gonna figure out that in half a year time your developer was still had access to one of your GitHub repositories, right? So yeah, just keep that one in mind. The third one is writing tests. So yeah, this one is pretty simple. There is unit tests that I'll not cover in this one. But again, since we're talking about a startup, I'd probably stick to end-to-end tests, which essentially cover the entire cycle of your environment. Imagine like your front end is sending a request to your backend, and then the backend sends one to your database. It retrieves some data. The data gets back to your backend server, and then this data gets back to your client side, right? You could build a test which does the entire cycle of things, and you could easily monitor the availability of your servers and services. The thing that I don't like about unit tests for now, especially for startups, and that's why we are not using them, is that since everything is changing so rapidly in your code base, and you need to be very mobile and flexible, if you are building unit tests for functions that you may later on just rewrite completely, you are essentially bottlenecking your development process. So try to minimize your headache of writing unnecessary tests by just using end-to-end tests, right? They are quite broad, so they will not tell you which exact function in that huge cycle has stopped working, but at least they are low maintenance. If you have then the endpoint in your backend server and your front end is expected to send some request, and that is not likely to change in the near future. I don't know, when you log in with your wallet and you send that wallet address to your backend server to store it for some, I don't know, analysis data, whatever. That is maybe not likely to change, but you can build an end-to-end test which will work for months ever since, and that could also decrease the maintenance that you need to do on your tests. The last thing that you want from your test is to be a bottleneck of your development. Another thing that I want to point out is front-end visual testing. This is again for the later stage. because you need to ship it as soon as possible, and visual testing is probably not applicable to early stage startups. There's two types of front-end visual tests. There's automated ones and then manual ones, which are partially tests. You can call them that, but yeah. The automated ones include Backstop.js and Storybook Chromatic. Both of them essentially render a component. They take a screenshot of your component. Let's say you're working on a React front-end app. They take a screenshot of your component, and then they show you the differences between the previous version and the next version. They overlay them together so you can see the changes. If your padding has changed and the button has gone down or up. So this is quite an easy way for you to assess if everything is in the right place or not. But again, maybe just having a look at your code yourself does a sufficient job for an early stage startup. There's also manual testing that you can do. There's this thing called Browser Stack, which essentially launches multiple browsers, like mobile ones as well, iPad ones, some 15-inch, 13-inch ones. So you can test your layouts, how if your buttons are aligned, if your text is not overflowing anywhere, and it's done in an easy manner. Some prefer using just plain DevTools in Chrome. I would probably stick to Chrome DevTools as well to simulate different environments and different sizes. But also try actually opening it on your phone, because a lot of stuff Chrome DevTools and this size simulation does not actually cover. Keep in mind that you need to test your stuff on a physical phone as well. There's also Polypane, which is very similar to Browser Stack. Again, you can open a bunch of windows of different size just to quickly have a look at your front-end app. And if you have a GitHub student subscription, which I think a bunch of you may have, you will get, I think it's a free year of usage. So yeah, have a look at that. Make use of it if you need to. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the tests. Now onto the establishing user feedback channels. This is also very important, and it goes very well with the business side of things. You need to establish, your feedback channels. You need to make sure that your users are giving you feedback. And I have split this into two categories. There is the one which involves no user involvement, pun not intended, and then the one with user involvement, right? Obviously, the one without any user involvement is going to be the most easy, the most non-intrusive, most frictionless way of obtaining feedback, and that includes PostHog. PostHog is an analytics tool which we are using and we're absolutely loving. So what it allows you to do is to stick a lot of triggers on all of your front-end buttons, for example, and all of your navigation on your navigation bar, on anything that is pressable or scrollable or whatnot. And you can collect the data of how users are actually interacting with your front end. It will also record sessions, so you will be able to replay a session of how the user is actually using your app, and you will be able to see the insights quite quickly of if the user is struggling with using that interface, if the cursor is navigating chaotically, and there's probably something wrong with your solution, and if most of the users who are using this feature are actually looking in the wrong direction, trying to find some feature that is not present there. So there's a lot of insight which you can get from PostHog. You can filter your usage by by countries or by age. You can collect a lot of data about the demographics of your user and stuff. You can build charts as well to make sure you're monitoring your front-end app, how many users have used the app today, how many users have pressed this button, how many users have succeeded in the final action after navigating to the page. The complexity of stuff that you can build in PostHog is incredible, and I highly recommend you have a look at it, because you can customize it as much as you can. Also, you can run A/B tests. This is also for a later stage, but this again goes hand in hand with testing and obtaining feedback and talking to your users. When you're testing a feature, you need to, establish an A/B test. So you have the control version and the new version. Essentially, what it will allow you to do is, after you ship the feature, you see how many users actually ended up, performing more key actions that you expect them to perform, or was the result worse than you expected. So yeah, A/B tests are a must-have if you are doing some user interface testing or general front-end testing. This is something that you should keep in mind. And post-hoc allows you to do it in a very easy manner. So yeah, do have a look at that. Yeah, and the ones with user involvement that allow you to obtain some feedback include the questionnaire, right? You might need to ask your users about a feature that they used, what went wrong with that feature, what do they would like to use instead. That's why you need like questionnaires or surveys. You may want to use like Google Forms, for example, for that, and you just like send the message onto your Discord or wherever your community is. You can also pair it with post-hoc. So you collect a cohort of people who have performed a key action, and only that cohort of people is is able to access this particular survey, because you don't want to like over annoy your users with unnecessary questionnaires. So maybe it's a wiser choice to target it a bit better, again paired with post-hoc. But yeah, in terms of questionnaire infrastructure that you might need, it could be either Google Forms, the easiest one. There's also Typeform, and also Formbricks, which is the one we're using. And it could go a long way. Like not only you will use it for obtaining user feedback, but also like if someone wants to sign up to something, like we had recently testnet signups, right? And people have been filling up the forms before they get like access to our testnet. So anytime that you need to obtain some data from your users, some answers, the questionnaires will probably be a go-to for you. So keep that in mind. Also, for the later stage, when you have some user base and you want to make sure that your processes are working well, I'd suggest having a ticketing system. The one we are using is in a form of a Discord bot. So since our community is mostly in Discord, what we have implemented is a bot which you can write to. It would create a ticket if you're having issues with your app. And we will sort it out, right? There's also UV Desk and Zamat, I think it's called. All of them are, ticketing systems or help desks, you can call them. So essentially what happens, a user complains about something not working and you sort it out, and that's pretty much it. Because it's very important for you to keep track on the issues that your users are facing, and post-hoc in combination with like a Discord bot, which collects complaints and tickets, as well as the questionnaire, would probably do 85% of what you need to do to make sure you're set in establishing your user feedback channels. Last but not least is the CI/CD pipeline. So essentially, why we need to have a CI/CD pipeline is we need to optimize every process, and long term, ideally, we should aim to automate everything that takes human time. So given that in an ideal scenario, all processes have to take the absolute minimum of human time, CI/CD is something that takes quite a bit of time, right? In a normal scenario, when you're deploying your Node.js API to production without a CI/CD pipeline, what you need to do is to ship it into your GitHub repo. You'd probably need to open SSH access to your server where that backend sits. You would need to stop it yourself. You'd need to replace the files. You'd need to rebuild it and make sure it works, and maybe run some tests on it, and then you're set. I don't know if it sounds easy or not, but it actually in reality takes like at least a couple of hours. So times that the amount of developers and the amount of pushes you need to do to your repository, and you'll end up with an enormous amount of wasted time. So make sure that you have a solid CI/CD pipeline, and the basics of it include running tests. So every time your developer pushes something into the master branch or like the release branch, it's necessary to run some tests to make sure the functionality works. Also, that the project is possible to be built and it does not crash. It's also important to figure out that if something is wrong on that front, you need to ensure that your project builds. You need to ensure that your tests are running well, and you need to redeploy it automatically to production. So in that case, we're using Jenkins, which is our go-to solution for CI/CD. And Jenkins takes care of everything that I mentioned. So it builds the package, it runs some tests, and it stops our Docker containers. It launches the new ones. It replaces and updates the Nginx configuration so that the traffic flows to the newly built containers, and we don't have to do anything. We just push to the repository and we save ourselves a bunch of time. And for front end, I guess it's a much easier job. You have Vercel, you have Netlify. Both of them are actually easy. But yeah, that's pretty much it actually for me. That suffices it for the technical part. I wish you all to build great projects, and it's been a pleasure. I hope you learned some things. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, Oleg, for your wonderful presentation. So much alpha, so much experience, and I hope the viewers appreciate it. Before we go, first of all, we have had a few questions from the chat. We just wanted to, first of all, present what we're doing real quick. We're Consaro. We're building fully decentralized cross-chain infrastructure built on top of CCIP. We are expanding right now, so if any one of you want to join the team, please feel free to reach out. Again, on Twitter, Telegram, anywhere. You can go through email or anything. We do have some questions from the chat. If we can go through them real quick. I think the first one is, there's someone building a Web3 FundMe app. Which stack/tools would you recommend, Oleg, for them to use for off-chain and on-chain?
No, that's a good one. Well, the one I have experience with is Node.js and Express and MongoDB or Postgres on the backend side, which is off-chain centralized. Yeah, there is nothing I can recommend in terms of Solidity. There's only Solidity and stuff and whatever I talked about. And yeah, for front end, again, can only recommend what I am using, which is React. So I'd probably go for React plus Vercel on the front end, Node.js and Express on the back end, maybe Postgres or MongoDB as a database, and Solidity for contracts, obviously.
Cool. Another one, building a reputation/review system for investors and consumers. Well, reputation is everything. But the point is, stop thinking about investors so much. If you have a great product that consumers like and want, and it solves a problem, you will find investment. Stop trying to make it, oh, we're so good, we're so investable. If you have a good product that solves a lot of problems, investors will line up. Don't give in to their demands and wants and stuff like that. Build your project. It's your company. It's your project. You decide what to do with it. Investor is a partner. It's not a god. It is not your boss or anything. It's a partner. Find a partner that really understands what you're building and is on the same page as you on how you need to do it. And then it's amazing. Cool. I think we're a bit over time, so we're going to cut this short. Again, feel free to reach out to us again on Twitter, on Telegram, over email. Join the team if you would like. We wish you all the successes and wish you all luck with your projects. Me and Oleg will be judging some of them. So we're looking forward to seeing all of your amazing work. And I hope you enjoyed spending time with us today. I hope you learned something. And yeah, I wish you all luck.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much
for hosting us.
Thank you very much, guys.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
And bye, everyone. Hope you have a great day and that you found this session useful, that you take notes. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Andy and Oleg, and they will be happy to follow up.
More than
Again,
happy.
thanks, Andy. Thanks, Oleg. Hope you have a great day. And yeah, I'll see you later today, everyone, for our next hackathon workshop. Bye, everyone.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.